Some people aren't looking for peace, they're looking for control. And the more you accommodate them, the more you erase yourself. If you've ever tried to reason with someone who twists your words, plays the victim when confronted, or acts like the world revolves around them, you already know this. Kindness alone won't save you. It won't change them. It might even make things worse. This episode isn't about pleasing anyone. It's about seeing the trap and breaking it. At Victory Stoic, we're not here to sugarcoat reality. We're here to face it head-on, with strength, clarity, and ancient wisdom made brutally relevant for modern life. Today, we're diving into the cold, uncomfortable truth about narcissists and why your urge to be nice is exactly what they use against you. And here's what's new. From now on, we're blending the power of Stoicism with insights from modern thinkers like Jordan Peterson, renowned psychologists, and grounded historical wisdom. Why? Because most people don't need more theory. They need perspective that hits where it matters. If this sounds like the kind of content that speaks to something deep inside you, hit like, subscribe, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. And we want to hear from you. Comment 1 if this topic hits home. Comment 0 if you're not feeling it yet. Your feedback means a lot, especially as we reshape Victory Stoic into something even sharper, richer, and more useful. Back to the hard truth. Narcissists don't change because you show them compassion. They change, if ever, only when they're confronted with consequences, not comfort. They interpret your patience as weakness, your empathy as an invitation, and your silence as submission. Most people stay in this loop for years, hoping their kindness will break through, hoping their love will transform someone who's emotionally frozen. Stoicism has a word for this kind of hope: delusion. Marcus Aurelius didn't waste his energy trying to change others. He focused on what was in his control, his own reactions, his own boundaries, his own inner strength. That's the blueprint. That's how you take your power back. Jordan Peterson goes further. He teaches that niceness, when used to avoid confrontation, isn't virtue. It's manipulation. It's fear disguised as morality. And narcissists sense that fear. They feed on it. So what works? The things we'll cover next. Real tools, grounded insights, tested mental strategies. They're not about beating a narcissist. They're about removing their power over you entirely. No false promises, no wishful thinking. Just what works. If you're ready to get clear, stop playing defense and start owning your inner world again. Let's begin. Number 1, you can't save someone who doesn't think they're drowning. Some people would rather sink than admit they're wrong. And if you keep diving in after them, hoping your love, patience, or kindness will pull them to shore, you're not saving them. You're just drowning with them. Narcissists don't change because you explain things better. They don't wake up one day and suddenly value your perspective. To them, fault is always external. You can't reason with someone whose entire identity is built on denying fault. You can't reach someone who sees every mirror as a weapon. There's a brutal elegance in this line by Marcus Aurelius. Don't hope that others change, accept that some won't. Not out of bitterness, but clarity. Not out of cynicism, but necessity. The Stoics weren't interested in fantasies. They dealt in what is. And here's the truth. No amount of kindness will make someone self-aware if they're committed to blaming the world. Consider Rachel, a 42-year-old woman from Seattle. For 8 years, she stayed in a relationship with a man who constantly belittled her in subtle ways. He never raised his voice. He never hit her. But every mistake was hers. Every disagreement became a courtroom where he was the judge and jury. "You're too sensitive," he'd say when she tried to express hurt. "I'm just being honest. You always twist things." She read articles, she watched videos, she even went to therapy, alone. For years she believed if she just communicated more clearly, tried harder, understood his childhood wounds, she could reach him. She was wrong. The problem wasn't a lack of love or empathy. The problem was that he didn't think he had a problem. Clinical psychology backs this. Narcissistic personality disorder (NPD) is defined in the DSM-5 as marked by a lack of insight and grandiose sense of self-importance. One of its core traits is an inability to accept blame or criticism, no matter how constructive. A 2019 meta-analysis published in Personality Disorders, Theory, Research and Treatment found that individuals high in narcissistic traits were significantly less likely to seek therapy voluntarily. And when they did, it was often to control others or boost their image, not to change themselves. This isn't just theory, it's hell in real life. Every time you tell yourself, maybe if I explain it differently, they'll understand, you're negotiating with a wall. You're offering water to someone who insists they're not thirsty while dying of dehydration. Stoicism demands that we differentiate between what we can control and what we can't. And here's the trap. When you try to save someone who doesn't believe they're lost, you're crossing into territory that doesn't belong to you. You start believing that their healing depends on your effort, that if you just love harder, they'll finally see. That's not noble. That's delusional. And it's the fastest way to lose yourself. Jordan Peterson once said, "If you're the one always making sacrifices and they're never appreciated, you're not in a relationship, you're in a hostage situation." This isn't just about narcissistic partners, it's about anyone who refuses to take accountability. Family members, co-workers, even adult children. If their default response to pain is projection, not reflection, you're not dealing with maturity. You're dealing with ego armor. The pain is real. Let's not minimize it. Let's not pretend it's easy to walk away from someone you love or someone you've invested years into. That's not weakness, that's being human. But here's where the Stoic in you must rise. Because what's at stake is your soul's integrity. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop carrying. You stop carrying the weight of their denial, their self-deception, their emotional games, and you redirect that energy to something that's actually in your hands. Your boundaries, your clarity, your future. Here's a tip you can implement at home today. Write a 2-column list. On the left, write all the things you've tried to fix in this person. Talks, compromises, sacrifices, apologies you didn't owe. On the right, write what they've done to fix themselves. If the right side is blank, you have your answer. Print it, keep it. That's your clarity in moments of weakness. In the words of Epictetus, you are not a servant to other people's choices. You are only responsible for your own soul. Trying to save someone who denies their damage isn't compassion, it's self-betrayal. You weren't born to be their lifeguard. You were born to walk your own shore, upright and unburdened. Let them sink if they choose to, just don't go down with them. Number 2, kindness in the wrong hands is a loaded gun, and you pulled the trigger. There's a specific kind of kindness that doesn't feel noble. It feels dirty, like you're giving away pieces of yourself just to keep the peace, like you're smiling while swallowing your own voice. And here's the kicker. The person on the other end isn't grateful, they're keeping score. Kindness, when given to someone who weaponizes it, doesn't build trust, it breeds entitlement. Jordan Peterson said it plainly. Nice is not a virtue. It's often a strategy to avoid conflict. And if you look closely, you'll see it play out all around you. Not just in toxic relationships, but in workplaces, families, friendships. People who would rather suffocate under silent resentment than speak up. Because speaking up might cause tension, and tension is scarier than disrespect. That's not virtue, that's fear in a Halloween mask. Let's talk about Thomas. 45, living in Arizona, married for 15 years to a woman who could cry on demand and turn any conversation into a courtroom drama. Every disagreement was a crisis. Every boundary he tried to set was met with accusations. You don't love me, you're abandoning me, or the all-time classic, you're being selfish. Thomas thought that being a good husband meant avoiding fights, giving in, being nice. So he apologized even when he wasn't wrong. He compromised values just to keep things calm. Years went by like that, but calm isn't peace, it's sedation. What looked like harmony from the outside was actually slow erosion on the inside. By the time Thomas realized it, he wasn't married. He was managed. Here's the Stoic truth. He who does not oppose injustice enables it. That's not from a battle cry or a protest sign. That's from Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who mentored Epictetus. He taught that real virtue isn't about being liked, it's about being right, even when it's uncomfortable. And when you offer niceness to a manipulator, you're not solving a problem, you're feeding it. Let's use an image. Imagine your niceness is a warm loaf of bread. You're offering it out of generosity. But instead of feeding the hungry, you hand it to someone who tears it up, throws it back at you, and then demands another. You don't teach them gratitude. You teach them that tantrums work. You train them to expect more every time you give in. You become a baker in a hostage situation. People who manipulate others don't look like villains. They look like victims. That's how the game works. They flip the story so your self-protection becomes their evidence of your cruelty. They cry louder than you hurt. And suddenly, you're defending yourself for setting a basic boundary, like asking for space or not answering a text right away. So what's the move? You don't become cruel, but you stop being useful to cruelty. You recognize that real kindness has a spine. It doesn't bend every time someone gets upset. It holds the line, not because it's rigid, but because it knows what it's worth. Here's a tip to practice today. Replace the word nice with clear. Stop asking yourself, was I nice? And start asking, was I clear? Was I clear about what I want, what I need, what I will and won't accept? If the answer is yes, that's real integrity, even if it makes someone uncomfortable. Especially then. Try this with emails, with family, with yourself. Instead of softening your language to make others more comfortable, speak like your time matters, like your values are non-negotiable. Because every time you dilute your truth for the sake of keeping someone happy, you pay with resentment. And no one else can spend that debt for you. There's science to this too. A 2010 study published in Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that people with high agreeableness were more likely to avoid conflict, even if it meant enduring unfair treatment or compromising personal values. The more agreeable you are, the more you open yourself to exploitation. Not because you're weak, but because your reflex is to smooth things over, not stand up. But Stoicism doesn't praise agreeableness. It praises courage. As Epictetus put it, if someone offends you, consider whether you have given them the power to do so. Your silence, your niceness, your people-pleasing, it's not harmless, it's a permission slip. Let's go back to Thomas. What turned things around? It wasn't therapy, it wasn't books. It was a single sentence he said during yet another blow-up. You don't get to talk to me like that anymore. He didn't shout it, he didn't explain it, he just said it. And then he left. For the first time in 15 years, his voice wasn't a question, it was a line. Not everyone claps when you set a boundary. In fact, the people who've been benefiting from your silence will probably throw a tantrum. Let them. Your job isn't to make everyone comfortable, it's to stay whole. That's the lesson of number 2. Kindness is powerful, but only when it's directed by wisdom. Used wrongly, it becomes self-erasure. Used rightly, it becomes a sword with no blood. Just clarity, just peace. So next time you feel the reflex to be nice, pause. Ask yourself, am I being kind, or am I just afraid? Because cowardice in a friendly tone is still cowardice, and manipulators know exactly how to smell it. Don't be the one who feeds the monster and then wonders why it grew. Be the one who closes the kitchen, who locks the door, who walks away with your dignity and your loaf of bread still warm in your hands. Number 3, narcissists don't love you. They love control, and you're just the throne they sit on. Once upon a time, because this story repeats itself in every generation, there was a man named Caleb. He wasn't a villain, at least not in the way villains are usually drawn. He didn't scream, he didn't cheat, he didn't hit. He simply needed to be right, always. He needed the last word, the spotlight, the praise, the moral high ground. And if someone close to him dared to threaten that image, even by accident, they'd feel the cold fury of subtle punishment. Withdrawal, gaslighting, passive aggression, or that sudden icy silence that said, "You've disappointed the king." Sarah, his partner, didn't notice it at first. Like many who fall into this dynamic, she mistook control for intensity, passion for presence, possessiveness for love. He needed her, or so it seemed. He always wanted to know where she was, what she was doing, who she was with. At first it felt like devotion. Later it became surveillance. She once laughed too loudly at another man's joke at a dinner party. Caleb didn't speak to her for 2 days. This is how narcissists bind you, not through love, but through control disguised as affection. They don't fall in love with people. They fall in love with the roles those people play in their personal mythology. And once you stop playing the part, they don't grieve, they replace. Seneca wrote, "He who lives for the admiration of others has lost himself." The narcissist lives not to connect, but to be admired, worshipped, confirmed. Your love isn't what they cherish, It's your obedience, your agreement, your reflection of their imagined greatness. In mythology, Narcissus didn't fall in love with Echo. He fell in love with himself, reflected in still water. Everyone else was just noise. In psychological terms, this is called narcissistic supply, the fuel that powers their ego. Compliments, compliance, praise, fear. Even negative attention will do as long as it centers them. That's why fights with them often feel surreal, like the laws of reason have been suspended. Because they have. You're not in a discussion. You're on stage reading lines in a play you didn't audition for, directed by someone who only allows one ending, their victory. Let's not romanticize this. Let's call it what it is. Power. Every gesture, every gift, every declaration of love is a chess move. And if you're not careful, you'll wake up one day and realize you haven't been living in a relationship. You've been living in a kingdom, one where you are servant, jester, and subject, all in the name of love. The Stoics warned us about this kind of dynamic centuries ago. Epictetus taught that if someone controls your peace of mind, your happiness, or your self-respect, they are your master. The irony is, narcissists often accuse others of being controlling, dramatic, or too sensitive. Why? Because in their world, any resistance to their control feels like betrayal. And make no mistake, when you stop complying, they retaliate, not always with violence, but with withdrawal, with smear campaigns, with subtle sabotage. The goal? Reclaim power. They don't want connection, they want compliance. Let's go back to Caleb. Over time, Sarah began to feel like a ghost. She could be in a room with him and still feel alone. Her opinions were filtered through his approval. Her moods, regulated by his reactions. She began to shrink, not physically, but emotionally. Like a flame inside her was being smothered, slowly, deliberately. One night, after a minor disagreement about something trivial, her forgetting to buy almond milk, he gave her the silent treatment for 72 hours. Not because of the almond milk, of course, but because she had, in some microscopic way, disrupted his sense of control. That silence wasn't distance, it was discipline. And that's when she finally saw it for what it was. You can love someone and still be in danger. Not the kind that leaves bruises, but the kind that rewires your brain to distrust your own judgment. And that's what control does. It doesn't need to imprison your body if it can colonize your mind. Want a simple tip? One you can try right now? Ask yourself this question. What happens when I say no? If the answer is emotional punishment, guilt-tripping, or sudden coldness, you're not in a relationship, you're in a regime. Another question, can I be fully myself around this person without managing their reaction? If you feel like you're constantly editing yourself, you're not growing, you're surviving. And survival is not love. Here's what the science says. A 2017 study in personality and individual differences found that individuals with high narcissistic traits demonstrated significantly higher patterns of dominance and exploitative behaviors in close relationships. These behaviors weren't driven by love, but by a craving for superiority. In short, they don't need you. They need what you represent. You might think your role in their life is unique, irreplaceable. But if you begin asserting yourself, if you stop playing along, you'll see just how fast they can pivot. Loyalty means nothing to someone addicted to admiration. And love for them is simply a mirror that flatters. So what's the Stoic path forward? It begins with detachment. Not from compassion, but from illusion. To be free, said Epictetus, is to live as one chooses, without needing the permission of others. If you're with someone who only loves the version of you they control, they don't love you. They love control. Stop handing over the keys to your emotional state. Stop mistaking performance for partnership. Love is not about staying quiet so someone else feels loud. It's not about shrinking so they can shine. That's not romance. That's tyranny dressed in perfume. Number 3 is not a gentle lesson. It's a hard mirror. But it's one you need to look into before you lose yourself entirely. Remember this, if someone needs to control you in order to feel loved, they are not a partner. They are an emperor, and you're not their subject. You're your own kingdom, and it's time to take the crown back. Number 4, no one has the right to demand your compassion unconditionally. There's a guilt tactic more manipulative than any insult or threat. It doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't storm out of the room. It looks at you with wounded eyes and says, I thought you'd understand. And just like that, you're cast as the villain. for daring to have boundaries, for refusing to tolerate what hurts you, for not offering unconditional empathy to someone who's never earned it. But here's the truth. You don't owe anyone compassion that costs you your dignity. Not your partner, not your parents, not your childhood best friend, and certainly not someone who's harmed you and refuses to admit it. Stoicism draws the line with precision. Compassion must be led by reason, not by emotional blackmail. Seneca once wrote, "Pity is for those who have lost their reason. Compassion is for those who still keep it." That's the Stoic position. Feel empathy, yes, but not to the point where it erases the truth. Not to the point where you betray your own sense of justice just to avoid being labeled cold. Let's talk about Ethan. He's a 38-year-old manager in Chicago. For years, he kept forgiving his older brother Mike, a man who always had a reason for why nothing was ever his fault. When Mike borrowed money and never paid it back, "You know I've been struggling." When he ruined Thanksgiving with one of his alcohol-fueled outbursts, "You know I've been under a lot of pressure." When he publicly humiliated Ethan in front of friends, "I was just joking, you're being too sensitive." Every time Ethan got close to drawing a line, the family guilt machine kicked into gear. He's your brother. Family forgives. The unspoken rule was clear. You're allowed to be hurt, but you're not allowed to hold anyone accountable for it. But discomfort is where accountability lives. And here's the Stoic punch to the chest. Forgiveness without repentance is not mercy. It's complicity. Modern psychology backs this. A 2014 study in the Journal of Positive Psychology found that people who feel pressured to forgive tend to experience higher levels of resentment, emotional fatigue, and relational detachment than those who either forgave at their own pace or didn't forgive at all. Coerced forgiveness doesn't heal. It rots. Here's what Stoicism teaches that pop culture tends to forget. Compassion is not agreement. It's not silence. It's not permission. It's clarity. A truly compassionate person doesn't allow others to keep hurting them in the name of understanding. A truly compassionate person says, "I see your pain, but I won't bleed for it." Think of compassion like fire. Used with discipline, it warms. Used without direction, it burns your house down. You are not obligated to be emotional firewood for people who never bring a match of their own. Some will expect you to keep lighting their world while they drown yours in smoke. That's not love. That's theft. One of the most dangerous myths we're sold is that being the bigger person means constant forgiveness, always giving another chance, always being understanding no matter what. But sometimes being the bigger person means walking away and not looking back. It means saying, "I understand why you are the way you are, but I still won't let you harm me." Here's a practice you can use right now. Write one sentence that starts with, "I can understand you, but," then finish it with a boundary. "I can understand you're under pressure, but I won't let you yell at me." "I can understand your past was painful, but I won't let it be the excuse you use to hurt people today." This trains your brain to separate compassion from compliance. Let's return to Ethan. One day, after Mike left yet another voicemail dripping with guilt and blame, Ethan didn't respond. He didn't argue. He didn't explain. He simply sat back and reminded himself, "I am not required to keep proving I'm a good person by letting someone treat me badly." That moment of silence, it was the beginning of his freedom. Compassion isn't measured by how much you can endure. It's measured by how much truth you're willing to honor. It isn't infinite. It has form, and like anything with form, it must be built on accountability, self-respect, and consequence. Here's the heart of number 4. If someone demands your compassion but offers no truth, no change, no honesty, they're not asking for empathy. They're asking for access to your patience, your time, your emotional labor. And when you give that freely without conditions, they learn that apologies are optional and your forgiveness is guaranteed. That's not Stoicism. That's servitude. Epictetus said it best, "Don't confuse being tolerant with being taken advantage of." One is strength, the other is slavery. There is power in measured mercy, in being the kind of person who sees the pain in others but refuses to let it dictate their own destruction. Who says with clarity and steel, "I see your wound, I won't let it become mine." If you're still with us, if you're still listening, comment 4 below to let us know you're here, that you're awake, that you're thinking. it means more to us than you know. Or, share your story, your line in the sand, your moment of clarity, your own battle with undeserved guilt. We read every word. This is not cruelty, this is clarity. This is strength. This is Stoicism. Number 5. Refusal is a moral act, especially when what you're refusing is poison. We are taught to say yes far too early in life. Yes to being liked, yes to peace at any cost, yes to people who don't deserve us. But no one teaches us that sometimes the most righteous, the most moral, and the most life-saving word you can utter is no. Refusing what harms you is not selfish. It's not mean. It's not heartless. It is a moral line in the sand, and drawing it is the first act of reclaiming yourself. As Jordan Peterson said, the willingness to say no is the foundation of moral action. Why? Because if you cannot say no to what destroys you, you cannot say yes to what saves you. The world doesn't suffer from a lack of kindness. It suffers from a surplus of people too afraid to walk away from toxic love, broken families, manipulative friends, or jobs that eat their spirit alive. And all of it is disguised as virtue. You can't just abandon them. You should give them another chance. Nobody's perfect. But here's the brutal truth. Not everything labeled love is worth keeping. Some things call themselves love but act like control. Some people speak of loyalty while draining your soul dry. And some second chances are just extensions of the first mistake. Let's talk about Angie. She's 41, works in marketing in Denver. Her ex-husband cheated on her twice. After the first time, he cried, swore he'd change, went to therapy for exactly 3 sessions, then declared himself healed. Angie took him back. Why? Because everyone said, he's trying, you can't just throw away years of marriage. But here's the part no one saw. When he came back, he didn't rebuild trust. He demanded forgiveness. He monitored her phone. He treated her with suspicion. Because deep down, he didn't want reconciliation. He wanted control over the narrative. And when Angie expressed fear, he called her bitter. When she pulled away, he called her cold. All the language of love was weaponized to guilt her back into submission. Until one night, after weeks of emotional exhaustion, she finally said it. No drama, no anger, just this. I don't care if you're trying. It's not enough. I deserve more. That was the end of it, and the beginning of everything. Saying no to dysfunction is not the end of your compassion. It's the beginning of your integrity. Peterson argues that refusal isn't only necessary, it's your moral responsibility. In his lectures, he warns against the dangers of agreeableness when it becomes a survival strategy. People-pleasing, he explains, is often a cloak for fear, a refusal to confront because confrontation risks rejection. But he insists, if you refuse to confront what's wrong, you become part of the machinery that keeps it alive. This idea isn't new. The Stoics lived by it. Epictetus warned, it is not enough to avoid evil, one must also not associate with it. This doesn't mean you become callous or closed off. It means you sharpen your ability to recognize poison, even when it's served in golden cups. You've probably heard it. The voice that says, you're being too harsh, when you finally stand up for yourself. The internal whisper that makes you second-guess leaving a bad situation because, well, they mean well. But meaning well is not doing well. And intentions without action are just empty poetry. Here's what psychology confirms. A 2015 study in Clinical Psychology Review found that individuals in toxic relationships who set boundaries and disengage showed significant increases in psychological resilience, self-esteem, and emotional regulation. Refusal, when practiced with clarity, heals. It doesn't destroy, it liberates. But why is it so hard? Because many of us were conditioned to confuse endurance with virtue. We were raised to believe that love is proven by how much pain we can absorb, that walking away is failure, that staying, no matter the cost, is noble. The Stoics would disagree. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, wrote in his Meditations, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Now ask yourself, if staying in a situation requires you to lie, to yourself, to others, to your values, is it still right? Is it still love? Imagine your self-worth as a house. Every time you say yes to what hurts you, you knock down a wall. Every time you justify someone's cruelty because of their intentions, you pull off a roof tile. Every time you forgive without change, without apology, without effort, you leave the front door wide open to the storm. Eventually, you're standing in ruins, wondering what happened. What happened is simple. You never locked the door. You never said no. Here's a tip. Try this now. Take a piece of paper and write a sentence that begins with, "I give myself permission to stop." Then finish it with what's been slowly breaking you. I give myself permission to stop making excuses for someone who never owns their mistakes. I give myself permission to stop calling this love when it only hurts. This isn't woo-woo therapy fluff. It's rewiring. It's the first blueprint for rebuilding your boundaries. Let's be real. Refusing to tolerate what's toxic won't make you popular. You'll lose people. You'll be called selfish, cold, even cruel. But understand this, those who benefit from your silence will always resent your voice. That doesn't mean your voice is wrong. It means it finally matters. There is no virtue in drowning to prove your loyalty to someone who poked the holes in the boat. No nobility in staying in situations that demand the death of your truth. Walking away isn't weakness. It's warrior work. It's the kind of courage that doesn't roar. It just quietly says, not anymore. So the next time guilt knocks and says, but they need you, answer with this, maybe, but I need me more. And that is moral. That is strength. That is the line between being good and being whole. Number 6, no one changes because you want them to. They change when the pain of staying the same becomes too much. You can't love someone into changing. You can't explain them into self-awareness. And you sure as hell can't cry or beg them into growth. People do not change because you're kind. They change when the consequences of their behavior punch harder than your patience. Jordan Peterson puts it bluntly, never reward bad behavior. Because when you do, when you comfort someone who's harmed you, when you rush to forgive without accountability, when you cover for their damage, you are not helping them evolve. You are helping them remain exactly as they are. In psychological terms, you're creating what therapists call learned impunity. When someone experiences no meaningful consequence for their destructiveness, they internalize one message: I can do this again. Take Mark, for example, a 39-year-old finance executive from Houston. Smart, charming, generous to strangers. But inside his marriage, he was emotionally manipulative, moody, and passive-aggressively cruel. He'd disappear for days emotionally, withhold affection as punishment, and apologize only when he sensed his wife, Danielle, was serious about leaving. And she almost always stayed. She told herself, he's under stress, or he doesn't know better. Or the worst lie, maybe I'm too sensitive. The cycle repeated for 7 years. Because Mark knew something. He didn't actually have to change. He just had to act sorry long enough to reset the game. Danielle's forgiveness had no cost. And because of that, his behavior had no consequence. This is what Peterson warns about repeatedly. When you remove the consequences of someone's bad behavior, you rob them of the incentive to grow. You're not showing love. You're removing the one pressure life naturally applies to wake people up: pain. Pain is a message. It's the body of the psyche saying something is wrong here. If you block that message by forgiving too soon, absorbing blame, or excusing behavior, you're muffling the alarm. Stoic philosophy aligns with this in a profound way. Epictetus wrote, if someone does wrong and you offer no resistance, you teach him to do wrong again. Stoicism doesn't demand you become cruel. It demands you become clear. And clarity means being unafraid to let people face the weight of their choices. Not out of vengeance, but out of truth. There's a line Peterson uses in his lectures that stings in the best way. Do not allow yourself to be the person who makes evil comfortable. That means you have to be willing to walk away, to let someone suffer the results of their own decisions, to refuse to play therapist to someone who doesn't want to be a patient. Think of it this way. Change for most people is expensive. It costs comfort, ego, effort, time. No one pays that price unless the alternative, staying the same, becomes even more costly. And here's the part people don't want to admit. If you're always absorbing the cost, they never will. Let's bring this home with a simple rule. Every time you protect someone from the reality of their behavior, you make that behavior more permanent. The longer you cushion their impact, the less likely they'll ever learn how to stand on their own moral feet. Here's a practical tip you can use immediately. The next time someone hurts you, instead of telling them it's okay, say, that was not okay. I need time, and I need to see what you do next. No lectures, no ultimatums, just space and observation. Let their actions, not their apologies, write the next chapter. Let's go back to Danielle. The turning point wasn't some big dramatic fight. It was silence. One day, Mark acted out again. Another cold stretch, another backhanded comment, and she didn't argue. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. She just said, "This is the last time I'm going to make excuses for you." And she left the room. Mark followed. Not because he changed, but because he realized the rules had. Danielle had stopped being a shield. And in that moment, he felt something new. Fear. Not of her, but of accountability. The kind that changes people, not because they're loved, but because they're finally forced to face themselves. To be clear, not everyone changes, and that's not your job to worry about. Your job is to create the conditions under which truth can breathe. Sometimes people rise to that, sometimes they don't, but you do not lose either way. You only lose when you keep padding their fall while you continue crashing inside. Forgiveness without change is spiritual bankruptcy. It looks noble, but it costs you everything. Peterson reminds us, rescuing someone too often is the surest way to ensure they never develop strength. And the Stoics, they said it centuries earlier. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who caused the harm." Meaning, don't retaliate, don't stoop, but also, don't enable, don't carry someone else's lesson for them. Let pain do its job. Let distance do its work. Let their silence echo back what they refuse to hear from your voice. And above all, stop trying to change people who only respond to consequences, not compassion. Compassion is a beautiful thing, but when it delays someone's reckoning, it becomes cruelty in disguise. So the next time someone says, "I'm sorry," look at what they do, not what they say. And if the only thing that ever changes is you, becoming more exhausted, more accommodating, more numb, then it's time to deliver the only message they'll ever understand. No more. That's not heartless. That's justice. Stoic, brutal, necessary justice. Conclusion. The price of peace is often your soul. Stop paying it. You've been told that kindness is strength, that forgiveness makes you noble, that silence is maturity. But what if those things, when handed to the wrong people, aren't signs of virtue, but symptoms of surrender? There's a certain kind of suffering that wears a polite face. It doesn't scream or bleed, it just settles. It settles into your posture, your voice, your daily compromises. Until one day, you don't even notice how many of your choices are no longer yours. From number 1 to number 6, we've laid it bare. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. Kindness without clarity becomes a weapon used against you. Narcissists don't love people. They love control. Compassion is not a commandment. Refusing poison is not cruelty, it's courage. And no one ever changed because you cried harder. They change when reality stops coddling them. Each of these truths is a slap to the soul, but better the sting of truth than the slow rot of denial. Better one honest no than 1,000 dishonest yeses that turn your life into a prison you decorated with good intentions. There's an old Stoic warning that doesn't get quoted often because it doesn't sound wise. It sounds ruthless. Musonius Rufus once said, "He who tolerates evil becomes its apprentice." And maybe that's the point. You weren't born to be anyone's apprentice in manipulation, guilt, or emotional blackmail. You were born to be free. Not safe, free. And that kind of freedom comes at a cost, being willing to disappoint people who profit from your silence. So if this video cracked something open, like, share, and subscribe to Victory Stoic for more brutally honest philosophy that doesn't flinch. Comment below with "enough," just that word, if this spoke to a truth you've been afraid to name. Or tell us your story. No filters, no shame. We read every single one, because this isn't just content, it's a battleground for self-respect. Thank you for listening, not just to us, but to yourself. And if you think this was heavy, just wait for part 2, where we go even deeper into the tactics narcissists use and the Stoic mindset that not only defends against them, but makes you impossible to manipulate. You don't need to become colder, just clearer, not harsher, just unavailable to the wrong kind of suffering. See you in the next one. Stay sharp, stay sovereign, stay stoic.